Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. I am processing in real time, what just happened in New York with Sean Diddy Combs. Not guilty on the most serious charges, guilty on, I believe, 2 prostitution charges. He could face up to 20 years in prison. I think that's what prosecution is asking for. I don't think they're going to get 20 years. I'm not sure how much time Diddy's going to get. I'm processing this in real time. Hopefully, we will be joined shortly by someone on the ground floor, Lauren Conlin. She's been reporting on this trial on the ground floor. Hopefully, she'll join us. In about 20 minutes from now, I will expand the conversation and include Anton Daniels, Delano Squires, and Shemeka Michelle. We will discuss the impact of these convictions, the impact of the Diddy trial. We'll talk about that for 30, 45 minutes. And at some point, I'm going to pivot into some sports topics. Lia Thomas has been convicted, or not deleted. Lia Thomas, the man that pretended to be a woman that won the swimming titles in the NCAA, UPenn has basically walked away from him and has apologized. We'll discuss that. There's a couple other things. Oh, Dame Lillard getting cut, the lack of loyalty in sports. Sophie Cunningham had some interesting things to say. And we'll end the show with a little of, as the WNBA turns, the Indiana Fever won the Commissioner's Cup last night. We'll discuss that. And then you need to stick around for Harmony, or flip over with me for Harmony. We'll probably try to get to that around noon today, about 2 hours from now. I'm going to have a discussion with Oliver Anisfeld. He's a young Jewish man that has a YouTube channel, I think, called JTV. He offered a rebuttal and response to some of the conversation we had on this show about Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson. He put out a video responding to me from a Jewish perspective, explaining in his mind why the Jews are the chosen people, and just rebutting some of the things that I said. He put this video out, I believe, 2 days ago, immediately emailed me and asked if I would be interested in responding or potentially furthering discussion. And we will do that today on the Harmony channel. And so hopefully here in just a second, we'll be joined by, we will be joined by Lauren Conlin. But before I get to Lauren, I do want to thank our great friends at Relief Factor for making today's show possible. You guys know I've been incorporating Relief Factor into my daily routine. So a friend of mine, it relieves inflammation. It's a drug-free daily supplement that relieves inflammation. There's 2 ways to get it. Call 1-800-4-RELIEF, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or visit relieffactor.com. Thank you, Relief Factor. And I'm going to get back. I'll have some more words to say about Relief Factor. But I want to get to Lauren Conlin right away, because she's live on the ground in New York. She's been covering the Diddy trial, and she can help me understand what happened here today and what happened during the trial. Lauren, my first reaction is, like, did he just get a slap on the wrist?
Jason, you are the first person I am talking to after the verdict. I mean, I'm still kind of shaking and in shock right now. And I don't necessarily want to say he got a slap on the wrist, because it was very clear that Maureen Comey did not take this as a loss. She made it clear, and she didn't say this exactly. I'm paraphrasing, but it seems like she will be seeking the maximum sentence for the 2 Mann Act violation charges, which would be 20 years. There is no way in heck that will happen. That's generally for the transportation of minors. If I had to guess, I would say more like an 18-month sentence with time served, which is why I do believe he was celebrating as he should. This was a huge win for the defense, a huge win for Diddy. And I mean, once they read the not guilty on racketeering and the not guilty on the Cassie sex trafficking, I mean, there were gasps in the courtroom. Like it was crazy. And the judge warned everybody to keep their composure, but, you know, they couldn't help it. And then Mark Agnifilo, after, you know, everything was read, the verdict was read, he stood up and said, you know, my client has been acquitted of very serious charges right now. He deserves to go home. $1 million bail, you know, let's get him out today. Obviously, Maureen Comey was not happy about that. She said, let's remember the conduct surrounding the charges he was convicted of. And so they have until 1 p.m. today, Jason, to submit their letters as to why he should be released to Two-Star Island on the defense side and why he should remain incarcerated until sentencing on the government side. So that decision will most likely be made by the end of the day today. And the judge looked directly at Combs and he said, Mr. Combs, I understand you don't want to go back to MDC today, do you? And Diddy said, no. It was a moment. I mean, he was like, no. And I caught Justin Combs and Diddy's best friend, Charlucci, on the way out. We weren't supposed to do interviews. I just said, how are you guys feeling? And they just kind of said, overwhelmed and great.
Lauren, when I say blessing, holy cow, are you blessing this show? This is the information that we...
Yeah.
You're telling me 18 months? That's a possibility in time served?
I mean, look, so Jason, that is my guess. This is pure speculation.
Yeah.
Pure speculation. It could be, I'm thinking 18 months to 2 years. I know she is trying to throw the book at him. I don't see that happening at this point, especially with the team of lawyers he's had this entire time. They've been incredible. And a lot of people were questioning the defense's closing argument, how sarcastic it was, you know, how maybe he didn't take it so seriously. But I sat there, Jason, I was looking at those jurors. There were 8 men on that jury. And I said to myself, Mark Agnifilo is speaking to the men. And there was also one woman who really seemed to smirk a lot when the defense was cross-examining some of the witnesses who were a bit flimsy. So I was like, he's talking to the 8 men and that one woman that smirked. He knew what he was doing. He spoke common sense, and I believe that it worked.
Lauren, just for my edification and just the makeup of the jury, 8 men, you said. What's the racial composition of this jury?
It was fairly diverse. You know, it's tough because the entire trial, we saw 18 jurors because the alternates were on the top row. So I think it was, I mean, there was an Indian man. There was, I believe, 2 or 3 Black people on the jury, and then maybe 1 or 2 Spanish people on the jury. And then it was predominantly white men. So yeah, it was interesting because also there were analytical people on the jury. There was an accountant, there was an investment analyst, which normally those work better for the prosecution because, you know, you're looking at the charges and you're seeing how essentially it does meet the predicate of breaking the law. But I think, you know, the jury, they did use some common sense here, and they're looking at maybe the predicate act of drug distribution under the RICO. And they're like, well, I guess if drug distribution is handing maybe, you know, a joint to a friend and saying, you know, can you smoke it? Like, who else is guilty of that? So they possibly were using their common sense. I don't know. I mean, I really want to interview a juror. I am dying to do that. So we'll see.
Having covered the trial, do you think they've reached a fair verdict? Not the right verdict. I'm not asking you to judge that. But do you think they've been fair and we should be sympathetic towards the jury?
Jason, it's a loaded question, and without having any of my personal feelings, I guess, come out for this, I think that it's been one of those cases where you know what this man has done allegedly since the late 90s into the early 2000s. You know, that's when I did feel like a lot of the more serious crimes took place, like the Club New York shooting, the quad shooting, the stampede, the basketball stampede, you know, and then you've got the aspect of the Cassie Ventura video. And that just tugs at your heart. I mean, it was so difficult to watch over and over. With all that being said, there were times I was sitting in court and I didn't quite understand why this was a federal case. The fact that baby oil was pretty much talked about, the biggest piece of evidence that was talked about in this trial more than anything else, the baby oil and the Astroglide, that was a bit odd. And again, it's not your typical racketeering case. It's not, it wasn't quite as open and shut. And same with the sex trafficking. You know, you've got these text messages where even though maybe she didn't mean it, Cassie would say that she wanted to be there. Same with Jane. And we don't know her state of mind exactly. You know, we can only guess. So I think that the jury, you know, they should be respected. They did use a lot of common sense, and I believe they only use the evidence inside the courtroom. And that's what you're supposed to do. They did not think of any of this outside activity, and they came to their decision.
And so
it is loud. Sorry, do you hear it here? It is so loud.
Well, that's what I was about to ask you.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the Karen Reed trial and the large crowds that were invested in the guilt or innocence of Karen Reed. Is it the same thing going on here in New York as it relates to Diddy? Is there a crowd outside, and what side are they on? Are they disappointed? Are they celebratory? How would you describe the onlookers or New York?
Well, it's not to the degree of Karen Reed, and there is no buffer zone around the federal courthouse. But in the front, I'm in the back, and you can kind of see this is where a lot of the press is standing because they're waiting for the attorneys to come out, possibly family members. But in the front, you will see a lot of free puff people, and they wear shirts and they are unapologetic. And it was no secret that they cheered very loudly after the verdict was read.
And so, final question, I'll let you go, and I just thank you so much for blessing us in the show. But what? Because my memory's fuzzy. How long has Diddy been in jail? And so when we say potentially time served, how much time has he been incarcerated? I can't even remember when this. I know there was a raid, and then there was a delay, and then he was arrested. How long has this been going on?
Yes, he was arrested in September of 2024. So, I mean, that's about 8 or 9 months. So, yeah, he's been in there for some time. And, you know, I have a feeling this judge has been incredibly fair. This entire trial, I have been so impressed with him. I mean, a lot of the times you can see where the judge would kind of side with the government on a lot of different aspects. He was not like that. And so I can see him releasing Diddy on house arrest to Two-Star Island. I cannot see him allowing him to travel back and forth to LA, Miami, and New York like the defense wanted, but I can see a shot at him getting out on house arrest in Miami.
Lauren, thank you so much. Awesome job too. Great personality. Who do you work for?
Myself. I'm an independent reporter. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're based here in America or in New York?
Yes, I live right here in New York. You can follow my YouTube channel at Pop Crime TV. I also have a website, popcrime.tv. You can follow me on Instagram, Lauren Emily Conlin, Twitter, Conlin_Lauren, and I'm all over the place. You can see me on Nancy Grace, many different shows, but I like to have my own style, Jason. I like to be a very unbiased reporter, tell both sides, and let you guys make your own decision.
Where were you educated? Where, did you go to school for journalism?
I went to Marymount in New York City, but I did not go to school for journalism. I went to school for theater. What a waste of money that is. Kids, don't do that unless you want to actually be on Broadway. But no, I had a minor in communications and journalism, but it's a passion of mine. I find everything fascinating about the law, and specifically, I find celebrity criminal trials so interesting. They do not get special treatment, Jason. Let me tell you, in that courtroom, they are like any other defendant.
Except they got a bunch of lawyers they paid a bunch of money for. Lauren, thank you so much. Awesome job. I got to thank my Coach JB turned me on to Lauren, and thank you so much. What a blessing. Thank you. Wow. Guys, Diddy, it's all just speculation on her part. But 18 months, potentially time served. I think the breakdown of who was on the jury, what they were thinking, 8 men on the jury, a predominantly white jury. This is a fascinating case. And we said at the beginning of this, early on, like, hey, man, I'm not, this raid and the way they went and raided him like they were raiding Pablo Escobar, and then nothing happened. And then I started speculating, like, hey, is this part of a humiliation ritual that's going on with Diddy? Is this part of a price he's having to pay? Do they want this blackmail information from him? That's why they raid the house. And then they're putting him in his place, letting him know, oh, you got too big, or thinking you were too big and too powerful. We have to chop you down to size, and then we're going to re-enter you into society after we've sent a message to all the other MK Ultras that we control and all the other celebrities that we can control, that at any time we can take you down and we can take you out. We can sit you in a prison cell since September. And, he could get a little additional time here. But what a message they seem to have sent to these celebrities that they control. Wow, this is I can't wait to talk to Shemeka and Delano and Anton and hear from you all in the chat. Email me at fearlessblazeshow@gmail.com. Hop on my Twitter and let me know what you think. This deal here with Diddy is fascinating. I'm processing it in real time. I'm trying. They basically convicted this man of this is slang for those of you he flued out some girls and maybe some guys, I guess. I don't know. I didn't pay that close attention to but flued out is what he got convicted of. And they put him through 9 months of incarceration, a long trial, destroyed his reputation. And I'm not simping for Diddy, but flued out, and you thought a jury dominated by men were going to, hey, we flued him out. He flued out some girls, and we're going to lock him up on RICO charges for life. That was not going to fly. This trial was a joke. The way it was unpacked, the way, Lauren points out, is the way the baby oil situation was such a big deal in this. Is like, and that's why I think a lot of us just quit paying attention to it very early on. It's like, this is a gay soap opera with baby oil. And most of us just like, we got all excited at the beginning, and then it was like, oh man, this is some gay stuff. And with baby oil, I'm out. This isn't a serious case. Very fascinating. I want to circle back because I wanted to get Lauren on as quick as possible. She's doing us a favor. She's the first person that she talked to was us live there in New York. She's covered the entire trial. So I want to make sure I remind you all again about Relief Factor and what it's done for me, allowing me to work out, what it can do for you. There's 2 ways to get Relief Factor: 1-800-4RELIEF, 1-800-4RELIEF. 3-week quick start. It's just $19.95, $20 to find out if Relief Factor can relieve your inflammation and pain. 70% of the people that get the 3-week quick start circle back and re-up because they're enjoying the benefits. As I mentioned, and I've only mentioned one way, but 2 ways to get it: 1-800-4RELIEF, that's the number 4, then relief, or visit relieffactor.com. I'm going to gather myself here. We're going to take a break and see if we can start with Shemeka and Anton and Delano a tiny bit early. I told these guys it would be 10:30 Central before I would get to them. But we're going to take a tiny break. Let me gather my thoughts, because I'm telling when Lauren came on this show and said, yeah, I think speculation, 18 months and maybe it's time served. And then when she says, the judge looks at Diddy and says, I know you don't want to go back to this place. I nearly fell out of my chair, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, holy cow. This thing is pretty much over for Diddy. The judge is halfway sympathetic. He knows he's watched a circus of a trial. There are people that will criticize this jury and will rip the criminal justice system. Maybe we should be criticizing the prosecution team. Maybe we should be criticizing the Department of Justice that pursued this case. Because I don't know if we should be criticizing this jury. And I know I didn't pay close attention to it, but Lauren did, and she just confirmed all of my instincts. This trial was a joke and was never serious, and the jury rejected it. And Diddy seems to be on his way home. What he'll do moving on and in the future, I don't know. But we'll bring on our panel. Maybe Anton, Delano, and Shemeka have some additional thoughts as they process, as I do and you do in real time. Don't go anywhere. Our panel next. That big rack of hers that she showed off constantly. It's just, and that peanut butter skin with that big rack. Like, Jay, keep your distance. That's going to get you into trouble.
Jason.
I've struggled with my health and weight loss most of my life, feeling sore, low energy, and having a hard time staying mentally sharp. But Relief Factor, it's changed all of that. I feel better, I move better, I think better. It's been a real transformation. And here's the thing, it's only $20 to try. If Relief Factor works for me, and I'm no easy case, it can work for anyone. Don't wait, call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com.
His words are our religion, our regrets and our decisions. We all want to go to heaven with freedom. It's my obligation, no hate, discrimination, raising up your hands for freedom.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about the Diddy convictions. There were two of them. It is pretty shocking that the three most serious charges he was not guilty on. But I say shocking, but not really surprising. If you paid any attention to the trial, and as we just had Lauren Conlin on, she did, it's like, hey man, this thing was a circus and it wasn't serious. And if you look at the jury pool, 8 men, it didn't have much of a shot. And so I'm sitting here, I'm just telling you, very few times am I speechless and just like, it takes me this long to gather my thoughts, even though this is kind of what I expected. And so we're going to be joined by Delano, Shemeka, and Anton Daniels. I think Delano is already here. Can we call Delano up? And Delano, will let you fire first. Man, what do you think of this verdict? Is this a slap on the wrist or is this justice?
Well, it certainly would feel like justice from Diddy's perspective, from his point.
6, 7.
Hey, the Shemeka countdown's got to stop. Go ahead, Delano. Yep. Go ahead, Delano.
Yeah, it'll certainly feel like justice from Diddy's camp and from his supporters. I'm somewhat surprised, and I heard the reporters, guess that he could be looking at 18 months of time served, and I was also surprised by that. I think I'm not particularly surprised when I heard the sex makeup of the jury, 8 men, 4 women. I was telling my wife earlier that for a lot of guys, the notion that someone is doing something against their will, when you can read text messages, text message evidence from that person saying, oh, I love when we have freak off, so I'm looking forward to the next freak off. I'm saying Diddy can be a degenerate, a reprobate, a sexual deviant, and that doesn't mean that he deserves to go to jail for 20 years. And I think that perspective, a lot of men, more men than women, would be sympathetic to that perspective. So I'm not terribly surprised. And Jason, one of the first things when I read the charges he was convicted of, and when they refer to it as the Mann Act, first thing that went in my mind is like, oh, the Mann Act is how they got Jack Johnson, right? So the Mann Act has been around for quite some time, and I did not know that it was also referred to as the White Slave Traffic Act of 1910. So this is a federal law meant to prohibit, transporting girls and women across state lines for used to be called quote unquote immoral purposes. Now it's used, primarily to prosecute prostitution. But ultimately, I think the reputational harm to Diddy is going to be more significant long term than at least the criminal sort of harm that he was facing. This doesn't say anything about civil. This doesn't say anything about the court of public opinion. But in terms of the criminal charges, this is probably as good as it was going to get for him.
I think Shemeka's here. Shemeka, if you're here, could we call up Shemeka? Shemeka, I heard her counting down. Is Shemeka not ready to go? I thought she was here. Clearly she's not. Delano, unpack a little bit more of this Mann Act, because, man, this thing, the analysis of this deal is about to get a bit more racial now that you're unpacking. And for those of you that don't know, Jack Johnson is the heavyweight champion from the early 1900s, the first black heavyweight champion. And, he dated white women and they came up, I think. Anyway, walk us through a little bit of that history, Delano.
Yeah, that's how I first learned about the Mann Act. Is, as you said, Jack Johnson, was a heavyweight champ, early 1900s, and as you said, he dated white women and would travel with them across state lines, and that's how they ended up. The federal government ended up prosecuting him and charging him, convicting him on the Mann Act, and I believe President Trump overturned that conviction or commuted, whatever the legal term is, back in 2016. So he's probably he's the first person I think about when it comes to the Mann Act. But R. Kelly was charged under the Mann Act, at least one of his charges, as well as Ghislaine Maxwell. So I think it's one tool that the federal government uses if they believe that someone is engaging in interstate prostitution of one type or another. Again, I didn't follow Diddy's trial super close. I'm familiar with Cassie. I saw the video, with him beating on her in the hotel. So I was familiar with that, but I didn't know that they charged him under this particular federal statute. And again, he would much rather take this charge than the ones on racketeering and conspiracy. So I think all in all, this is probably the best case scenario for him. But again, Jason, that was the first thing that I thought. Because when I think Mann Act, I think Jack Johnson, and it's not because, and it doesn't make me look at Jack Johnson as some vicious criminal. And that's why I said the reputational harm to Diddy is probably going to be more long-lasting than the criminal harm.
They may have just turned Diddy into a martyr. Shemeka, welcome to the show. Your reaction to the verdict?
Jason, I'm not surprised. As Delano was saying, with all of the text messages, and it seemed as if Cassie was really into what was going on, I thought that was going to definitely play a big role in them finding him not guilty. Even if she was she was having this whole issue of being afraid. There were times, as I understand it, that she went back home, she was with her parents, and then she would return to Diddy again. So it just seemed as if she was enjoying these freak-offs, that she was a willing participant. And so I didn't think he was going to get charged on that simply because of her testimony. It's almost like after she testified, even the public was saying, oh, he's going to get off. He's not guilty. Right after her testimony. I don't know who this Jane person was, but definitely after Cassie, seemed like public sentiment just all said, this is a joke. and we don't even really care anymore.
Anton Daniels, welcome back to the show. Anton, did this trial end up turning Diddy into a martyr?
I think it did. And I think that the biggest thing that he was convicted of was domestic violence. This is a domestic, and from my perspective, this is a domestic violence dispute. And he was convicted of being extra freaky. And he was also convicted of the court of public opinion. Before he ever set foot in the trial, they were already saying that he was guilty. I remember different accusations about him being with children. Obviously, people wanted to tie him and associate him with other celebrities in order to bring them down. And people were already convicting Diddy. Whereas when you actually looked at what it was that they were using to testify against him, including Cassie's testimony, including the Jane, which allegedly is 50 Cent's former baby mother, in which he's still paying her rent to today. When you started to look at the details, we may not have necessarily agreed with his lifestyle, but at the same time, I didn't see anything except for domestic violence. And I'll go even further to say that I don't agree with the fact that they were able to give her immunity, that she was able to get a payday and get out of it, because from my perspective, based off of the testimony and based off of the facts, she was the Bonnie to his Clyde. She was the person that was making the threats against other people. She was threatening to kill people. It was recorded. It was played on camera. She was the one that was making a lot of the different phone calls. And I'll even go as far as to say, I seen you make the correlation between Jack Johnson, and I agree with that. But let me also say that these charges, right, trafficking, all of these things, these charges were created to go after much more vicious people. You're talking about the mob. You're talking about people that are pimps from prostitution. You're talking about people that are taking children back and forth to different states in order to make sure that they were prostituted out and make money off of them. So now we have a situation where you have this far-reaching, broad federal government that can then apply these charges at will and then be able to basically throw them on people in order to continue to get more funding. And I had some conversations with different people that work in the federal government for Homeland Security, the FBI, and so on and so forth. And that is one of the ways in which they get their funding. They get their funding by going after big people, big targets, and then that is how they're able to pitch for additional funding from the federal government and taxpayers. And for me, this just looks like a big waste of taxpayer money. But at the same time, they did make him a martyr, because from all of the evidence that was presented, I didn't see anything except for a man that was paying to have freak-offs and was extra freaky. And again, we may not necessarily agree with his lifestyle, but I don't believe that he should be convicted and be facing 10, 20, 30 years in prison. That's nonsense to me.
Guys, we're going to take a quick break to reset the audio. We got a little bit of an audio issue and problem. Give us 1 minute, 2 minutes to reset the audio, and we'll be right back. Why am I on ownership side? And I'm on ownership side because I think guaranteed contracts would damage the NFL product, what's left of the NFL product. I think guaranteed contracts have damaged the NBA. And it's why we have load management and guys that really don't care. And I think some of that is already creeping into the NFL. Instead of, and again, this is why I question myself, is like, I'm on the side of a bunch of elite billionaires and want them to have more power and control over the players. Yes, as a fan, that's where I'm at. It may not be logically consistent or logically moral or morally consistent. I don't know, but that is where I am. I feel like the players have too much leverage and the product is suffering. And as a fan, I don't want the product to suffer anymore. Head over to Jason Whitlock Harmony and subscribe. I'm tackling politics and entertainment with a distinct biblical take, separate from Fearless. Spread the love, and thanks for supporting the Fearless Army. All right, welcome back. I think we have our audio issues figured out. I could make out what they were saying. I hope you could as well. Anton, I'm going to circle back to you. And obviously they've destroyed or damaged Diddy's reputation, but he may come out on the other side of this even more popular and wrapped in that victim flag. And part of me yesterday was thinking like, hey, this is going to be a blow to hip hop and the whole culture and brand of hip hop. And now I'm sitting here in real time going like, well, maybe this will be good for hip hop and empower hip hop. And you can see a bunch of songs about how we're targeted and we're victims. Anyway, how does this trial and what happened to Diddy affect the rest of hip hop, Jay-Z, anybody, the brand of hip hop? This whole thing may be a win for Diddy and hip hop.
I believe that he's the victim. As crazy as that sounds, I believe that Diddy is the victim, and this trial has basically proven that he is. Anybody that followed it from the time that they first announced the charges all the way up until, they read the verdict, you can tell that this was basically an opportunity for the federal government to try to get a win. And not only did they try to get a win, they got a win on top of the fact that he had to pay Cassie, on top of the fact that she was also the Bonnie to his Clyde, and on top of the fact that, if you remember, they also tried to sue Jay-Z and set him up with a person that had never been in his purview in the first place. And people automatically jumped on it, and they automatically tried to convict him also in a court of public opinion. I'm not even sure that you can say that this was a fair trial when all of the jurors had already been familiar with every piece of evidence that they were trying to present against him, that they was already painting him as a negative person before he ever even stepped foot inside of the court. They didn't give him bail. They let him sit in jail. And then they also tried to leverage Cassie in order to get a bunch of other people to file lawsuits. If you look at Dawn Richards' testimony, she benefited from it. She also was just on his Love album that he dropped right before they arrested him, and they tried to convict him. So the very people that were testifying against him, which obviously we know that the federal government offered them immunity, were the very ones that were benefiting from him. Cassie, she enjoyed a phenomenal lifestyle. Now she gets to go off and ride in the sunset with her boyfriend, her trainer boyfriend. For me, it looked like a money grab, and so it looks like he was getting shaken down and finessed. And so I do think that they made him the hero, and he is the victim of this whole situation. He may not be the victim as far as his lifestyle and what we agree with as far as how people are supposed to conduct themselves. But last I checked, being extra freaky wasn't a crime. At worst, this was a domestic violence situation. It was jealousy. It was a person that got too much money and all of the power went to his head. But they didn't prove anything except for this was a trope. This was an opportunity for them to try to get a win, and they failed spectacularly. And I don't think that he should have got convicted on any of the charges.
Delano, is the word victim and Diddy, is that too strong of a word?
I'm not gonna use it just because his behavior is part of the reason he ended up in this particular situation. One thing that I think is important to point out, again, just from my limited knowledge of the case, is that, and this goes to your point about hip hop, Jason, is that the prostitutes we're talking about, many of them are men, right? He was hiring men to sleep with women that he was involved in, right? So involved with. So I get Anton's point in terms of him being overcharged and the perception that he was railroaded. But Diddy's behavior is what put him in this particular situation.
I hate this, Jason. I can't, man. I can't, bro. Because it's like, what are you talking about? Nobody deserves to, bro. Killers get more time than what they tried to charge. They tried to get this man life. They tried to get him the rest of his natural life in prison.
I spoke to the overcharge, and obviously the jury heard the evidence. They deliberated on it. I always tend to give the jury the benefit of the doubt because they're the people who spend the most time with the evidence, and they found him not guilty on 3 charges. But what I'm saying is, if you're hiring men to sleep with your girlfriend, right?
That's tricking. It's called tricking.
I mean, however you want to phrase it. But if this is a lifestyle that you're living, and you're a public figure, and you're the type of person who can and does have political enemies, you should know that there's a possibility somebody's gonna come after you. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just living in the real world. So if you're the type of person who brands yourself as Mr. Love, and I'm caring, and I'm compassionate, and I care about the community and all this other stuff, you better have a clean closet, because this happens regardless of who you are, white, black, Chinese, or candy stripe. If you're the type of person, you're a public figure, and you have skeletons in your closet, you leave yourself vulnerable to being prosecuted. And I'm not saying that's right. I actually think that's wrong.
You leave yourself vulnerable to be prosecuted.
The criminal justice system should not be used for political payback. I'm saying it should not be. What I'm saying is that it often is. And obviously, I mean, I think arguments can be made that this is what happened in Diddy's case. What I'm saying is, I'm not going to call him a victim, because much of this, I guess if you want to be technical in terms of the prosecution side, sure, you can say that he was overcharged, right? And this should never.
A victim. If somebody is being overcharged for something, and we know that the consequences that come behind it, because let's be clear, this is not just about Diddy. This is a reflection of our justice system at large. What they do inside of our justice system, and thank God Diddy was one of the few people that had the resources to be able to effectively defend himself, because I don't worship celebrities. So I'm not using him as the litmus for whether or not I should do or not do, or have freak offs, or whether or not I got too much money, or I let the ego go to my head, or whether or not I'm paying dues to go and bust down my chick because I'm a cuckold. That's not the kind of conversation that we should be having. The conversation that we should be having is, how many men are in prison that didn't have the resources that Diddy have? Thank God he did, but they are being convicted. And what the federal government and what these states often do is they overcharge, the word that you're using, they overcharge men on a regular basis. Most of those guys in prison, to be honest with you, and that's why we got the Innocence Project, were overcharged. And what happens is, they're not really guilty of what they're being convicted of, but the federal government will trump up all of these charges, and they will throw this on there and this on there and this on there. And then they will scare these guys who got to get this public defender. And then they'll say, you know what? If you don't plead guilty to these charges, you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail, because nobody is going to believe you, and you're going to get this lawyer over here that got these slip-ons that's not even qualified to defend you against these charges that the federal government is going to throw at you. So I don't think that this is just about Diddy. I think that this is a reflection of our justice system that often at times use men, black men in particular, as the people, and then they become the victims because they're not getting convicted of the crimes that they've actually committed. They're being overcharged.
Let me hop in here.
The things that they did not do.
Let me hop in here. Let me hop in here. I think power will abuse anyone. And we could go story after story of, look, Karen Reed. We just came out of the Karen Reed trial, and the police clearly killed another police officer, and they tried to put a little white woman in prison for life when they did the killing. That just got proven. So power will abuse, and it doesn't care what color you are. And to me, this Diddy situation, is it Diddy's not a victim. He's a co-conspirator that the power system and the elite wanted to use to make some sort of point, wanted to use as some sort of example so they could exert more power and control. I clearly, this is, to me, a miscarriage and an overcharge, but I don't think we can zero it down to, hey, this is what happens to black guys. Because again, when you put yourself I'll even say Karen Reed, she was a drunk. She got drunk that night. She's a victim of an overcharge, but she did put herself in harm's way. And that's why there are some behaviors people need to adopt to keep themselves out of harm's way. And when you have as much power as Diddy, and you're conspiring, in my view, because if you look at Diddy's father, he was some sort of government plant and agent. There is a price. And when you make your money and gather your fame off of being basically a demon and promoting demonic culture, there is a price that you will have to pay at some point. Diddy just paid it. Now that he's about to get his rewards, he'll probably be more famous. He didn't snitch on anybody. He let them contain it the way they wanted to contain it. No different than Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeff Epstein and whatever happened to them. But I'm always hesitant on the victim narrative. I overcharge, miscarriage of justice, but there are very few victims. And I say that because I sit here and say, man, they just got this dude for flued out. And I sit there and, man, if flued out is a charge, oh boy, I better, I might be going down for that and, talking about my past. But if flued out is a charge, whew, I'm not going to sleep well tonight.
Jason, can I ask you a
Anton,
question?
I'll let you respond to that. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I disagree wholeheartedly with everything that y'all saying right now. And one of the things that I believe, because I believe y'all really surface level right now. The real issue, in my opinion, is the fact that he decided to go against a major liquor brand and he wanted to go against Diageo. And the minute that he started to actually pivot to where he wanted to take ownership and he no longer wanted to be a puppet, that is the time that you started to see the downfall of Diddy. The downfall of Diddy, and this is why I think is much deeper than everybody want to have a conversation about. When Diddy started to speak out against the liquor company that he was promoting because everybody thought he was part owner and he really was just a promoter and he was a high paid promoter as a result of it, when he started to file that lawsuit against Diageo, that is when you started to see all of this stuff uncover. That is when you started to see everything come out. That is when Diddy ain't been no different than the way that he done been for the last 30 plus years. No different. And it ain't even been a secret. As a matter of fact, everybody knew, and everybody that participated in all of these freak-offs knew exactly what was happening at a Diddy party, and people voluntarily put themselves in a situation to go after it. So you're telling me that today they decided to overcharge him and that they decided to go ahead and try to put him in prison for life. And we're justifying it by saying that the fact that he was a celebrity, that he should have carried himself with a greater level of representation of what we are supposed to operate as people, and we're not calling him a victim? Seriously? Is that the argument that y'all saying?
No, my argument is that he's involved in a demonic culture, this rap music industry and the music industry in general, and that Diddy felt like he had reached a level of power, no different than Kanye West. I've heard Kanye West say this, and people say this about Kanye. It's like, hey, I'm a billionaire. I'm just like everybody else that's a billionaire and has made all this money in the entertainment industry. And now I get to be a shot caller. And I have all of this blackmail information from my home. And it appears to me the FBI, the Department of Justice, went into his house, took all of his leverage away, his blackmail information, and put this man in his place in their mind. No, you're not like us. We allowed you to become a billionaire, and now we're going to put you in your place and tarnish your name and reputation and put you don't have all this power. I've heard Kanye talk about it. I've heard other celebrities talk about it. And again, I don't think I'm being surface level or we're being surface level, because there is a deeper conversation that overall this show promotes, and it connects to Diddy in terms of who controls the music industry, who puts the puppet strings on someone like Diddy, who, to me, this scene feels almost like a lesson they learned from Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. We have to put these people down and take their leverage away at certain points in times, and particularly as it relates to this black man that thinks he's a billionaire and a shot caller. And now I am somewhat playing the racial card, but the real puppet masters are the people in control of that music industry and who granted him the right. Because for me, as it relates to rap music, it's not about some amazing talent. It's about promoting a certain message, a nihilism and a anti-Christian, anti-white values that I think Diddy is a part of, and making sure that power flows to the Democratic Party and the people that believe in globalism. I'm not trying to promote a surface level conversation. I'm not being defensive, but man, there's a lot of chips on the table as it relates to what happened to Diddy and trying to figure it out in real time. And I know we've all been thinking about it. Go ahead, Anton, then I'm going to circle. I think Shemeka wants to jump in. Go ahead.
That means that he never should have been convicted in the first place because he was one of the biggest advocates for the Democratic Party. He was one of the biggest people that promoted some of the very music that you're saying that they're trying to promote in the industry itself that is promoting all of this debauchery and stuff that we stand against, right? If that is what it is, because you can't compare him against Epstein. Epstein was associated with children allegedly. It's not the same thing.
Well,
If you're saying that it's his lifestyle that they want to promote, that the LGBTQ community, that the debauchery and continuing to promote it through rap music, that he's the biggest proponent of it, the liquor. If you're saying the Democratic Party, he was one of the biggest advocates against Trump. He was one of the biggest people that for years was on the get out and vote, 106 and Park and all of this, right? So if that be the case, then why is it that he is the person that's going down if that's what they're trying to promote and if they're trying to use the most powerful figures in order to do so?
and I'm going to answer that, and then Shemeka, I want you to jump in. But because like a Kanye West, like a Jay-Z, and these guys all jump into this lane naive. And then sometimes they evolve and elevate, and the scales start coming off their eyes, and they want to be less controlled. Hey, I'm a billionaire. I'm a shot caller. I've heard Kanye specifically talk about this, and that's like what had caused him to be upset, and Dave Chappelle and the others. And the next thing you know, they're saying, hey, man, and they start questioning in their minds. And I want to be crystal clear because my words get monitored very closely, and I get it. But they start questioning the Jewish executives that they answer to, and the next thing you know, they get slapped down and they get, okay, you can't watch this documentary and promote this documentary, Kyrie Irving. Kanye, you can't put out any tweets anymore, and we got to shut you down. Candace Owens is going through it right now. I'm not saying that's where Diddy was and is, but that seems to be the pattern. People start thinking they have the same power as the people that installed them, and there becomes a problem. And Diddy, to me, gets a slap on the wrist, but he's a message to all these other Negroes out here in this rap music industry and all you celebrity Negroes that think you're all powerful. There are people that argue. Like Bill Cosby had no problems until he started talking about, let me buy CBS. And it's like, hey, man, that ain't your lane. That's not what you do. You don't own any major media platforms. There are people that argue. That's what got Bill Cosby sent to prison. Shemeka, go ahead and hop in here.
I was going to say, I think the lines are being blurred. When it comes to legally, is Puffy a victim? I would say yes. And I think the hesitation in saying he's a victim legally has a lot to do with the fact that we disagree with him morally. And we feel like morally he opened himself up to this because of the lifestyle that he was living. But because they weren't able to prove that he was guilty of these charges, clearly he was overcharged legally. Clearly he's a victim legally. But because of the moral aspect, I think we're having some reservations in saying that. just for me, morally, I will never look at him the same. But I am glad that he got what he got, or he got off of those other charges, because they did seem to be, it seemed to be an overreach, especially after hearing Cassie's testimony. But I do think that morally, I will never look at him the same, simply because he, wanted to watch men sleep with his women, and that to me is just gay. But he wasn't charged morally. It was legally, what did he do? And the fact that he did not do the things that they accused him of legally, I would say he was a victim. I would go as far as to say there are some things they need to look at again with R. Kelly, free R. Kelly. I do think that the federal government a lot of time comes in and they overcharge people. And if you don't have the money that Diddy has, then you're ass out. And I think in this case, he was able to fight, have a good defense, but that's not always the case.
I think the other thing, Delano, I'm going to hop to you here. Give me 30 seconds. The other thing that the expectations going into this trial is, we thought, because of the Justin Bieber speculation, that, hey, Diddy was involved with young kids. And because there's an allegation when Bieber was just a teenager. I don't think that ever played out in court. And it certainly didn't to me. And my expectations were like, oh man, this is going to be about the same things as Epstein, and that's what the rumors and speculation are. And none of that played out. And that's the other part where I think people are disappointed and perhaps even sympathetic towards Diddy. Again, I just have such a strong anti-victimhood mentality that it's hard. I'm probably lean with Delano. It's hard for me to go there, but I certainly get you and Anton's point. Delano, go ahead.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe Anton will call this surface level, but when I think about cases, one, I look at criminal proceedings, as individual cases, right? They could be representative of something larger, but oftentimes they're not. And I just go with facts and evidence. I never share speculation, rumor. Well, look at how Usher reacted when Diddy talked about sleeping over. Look, I don't share, because people have reactions for all different types of reasons, right? I want to know, what's the evidence, what's the data, what's the facts, and the jury is always the group of people who are closest to these things than anybody else. So if they found that they had enough evidence to convict him, on prostitution, he can certainly appeal, and it's possible that those convictions will be overturned, and then he won't have anything to worry about on a criminal proceeding. But one of the reasons that I don't get into this, and because when we start trying to connect dots, sometimes it's like, okay, it sounds good, but when Anton brought up the Diageo stuff, Diddy sued Diageo in 2023. They settled the lawsuit in January 2024. He was arrested on these federal charges in September 2024. And maybe it's possible Diageo said, look, this is payback for him embarrassing us, but I don't have evidence of that. And for the people in this world, there are always business deals swirling around. There are always multiple things in their personal life swirling around. So you can always connect the dot, and you can say, well, this person knew this and they want to buy that. And it's possible. I'm not ruling anything out. But when it comes to these particular facts and this particular set of evidence, again, as I said, the RICO stuff, I never thought that the RICO stuff really had much of a chance. And one of the tells that somebody has a weak case is when they start talking about things that have no legal or criminal relevance. Whether Diddy had 1 bottle of baby oil or 16,000 bottles of baby oil, being a baby oil merchant is not a crime, right? So the fact that people kept leaning into that, it was like, okay, we want to sully his reputation in the court of public opinion. And in fact, oftentimes, getting convicted in the court of public opinion is worse than getting convicted in a criminal court, because Diddy may have to go the way of Russell Simmons and go live over in Thailand or wherever he is, or just live out of public view for some number of years until he can rehab his reputation. And I don't think that this is going to help him in the world of hip hop, because a lot of them guys, one, didn't get down like that. 50 Cent, certainly the leader of that charge, but he made men visibly uncomfortable when he talked about partying with them. So I don't think that this is going to help him in hip hop. What I do think could happen, and my wife asked me about this, if the president decides to wade into this and say, I'm commuting, vacating the sentence, commuting, said, pardoning Diddy, whatever it is, I think that this could be something, one, this is going to be a hot topic on social media. I think it'll further exacerbate the gender wars because black women will say, see, nobody protects black women. And a number of black men are going to say, see, a lot of black men get railroaded. And I could see Republicans using this to do further outreach to black men and say Democrats talk a good game about criminal justice reform, but President Trump and the Republican Party is the ones that really deliver on it. So I could see this being used more so for political purposes, more so than within the hip hop world.
Can I give
Anton,
you a little bit?
hop back in.
So you said that he settled with Diageo in 2024, in the beginning of 2024, right?
Correct.
January 2024. The Cassie civil lawsuit was first filed in November 2023. Then he settled, and then that's when he wound up settling with Diageo after he fought the lawsuit was filed against him, and then you had a litany of other lawsuits where people were piggybacking against him, and then that's when he wound up settling the lawsuit with Diageo the very next year. Then you had CNN release the tapes right after that in March, and then that's when you seen the arrests for Diddy later on, later last year. So that is the real chain of events. You can't just look at it and say, oh, well, this is when he was arrested. He was already facing the charges. He was flying to New York in order to get arrested because he already knew what it was before they ever even arrested him, and that's why he had a hotel room in New York. So if you're looking at the chain of events, if you're looking at when he first started having a conversation about Diageo, it was actually on Earn Your Leisure when he was openly speaking against them, and he was having a conversation about why they were no longer supporting and promoting Ciroc and why he actually wanted to get his own brand. That is the true timeline behind why you've seen things happen. So if you're telling me in less than a year's time, when he wound up getting these civil suit charges and when he first started having conversations all the way up until the time where he actually got arrested, that's all just a coincidence when he's been operating the way that he's been operating for all of this time, I don't believe that. I'm not going just based off of when they arrested him. I'm going by when the tapes was released, when the lawsuits was filed, when the piggyback lawsuits was filed, when he settled, when he first started having a conversation about the big liquor company. That is the true timeline of what happened and the true downfall of Diddy. Prior to that, he was getting in a war. He was dancing on a screen. He was doing a new album. He had all of the same people that testified against him in a trial. Dawn Richards and all of those people, they were on the album. They were loving him. They were supporting him. Nobody had anything to say about him. When he started giving people back their masters, when he started doing all of that, that's when you started seeing everything else started to go downhill from there.
I want to put a pin here for a moment. I got to take care of a tiny bit of business, so give me 60 seconds for that. But I want to pivot to something Delano has put on the table. And what is going to be the influence or impact on hip hop, rap music, as it relates to this whole Diddy affair, the speculation about Diddy, the martyrdom that perhaps he's about to lean into? How are we going to perceive hip hop moving forward, and how many songs are we about to be inundated with that will cast Diddy as a martyr? So give me a second to take care of a little business, and we'll come back to that. And Shemeka, I'll start with you with that question when we come back. I want to talk to you guys about home title lock. If you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. When's the last time you checked on your home title? That's the legal proof you own your house. If you're like me, the answer is almost never. The problem is, in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles, and your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on one document, use a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee with your county, and boom, your home title has been transferred out of your name into theirs. Then they take out loans using your equity or even sell your property. You won't even know it's happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. That's why you need to stop what you're doing right now and find out today. If you're already a victim, use the promo code FEARLESS at HomeTitleLock.com to make sure your title is still in your name. You're also, you can get a free title history report plus a free 14-day trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes. And if fraud should happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Go to HomeTitleLock.com right now. Use the promo code FEARLESS. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code FEARLESS. Shemeka, you've already said your perception of Diddy will be forever changed. Will this have any impact, this whole Diddy affair, on your perception of hip hop?
I think what it will do, as far as some of the other people, they've been saying need to go down, Jay-Z. I think when TJ said this morning that it kind of gives you that feeling of Epstein, like nothing will ever come from it. I think that's the way that I feel. I kind of don't want to hear any more implications or accusations about anybody else in hip hop, because I just feel like this trial was just so poorly done. If there were actually things that Diddy did, I would have liked to know that. I would have liked to know that he did something to Justin Bieber. I would have liked to know that he did something to Usher. The fact that they put us through all of this emotional ups and downs for no reason, I just feel like they don't have anything legally, and that it's just a waste of time. And I don't think anything will come from it. So I think when it comes to hip hop, I kind of just don't want to hear this again, because I feel like if you had something, you would bring out your best, bring the big guns right away. And they didn't do that. Of course, for myself, I'm not interested in any of the music that'll come from this, and I'm sure there'll be tons, and I'm sure people will eat it up, because when it comes to the so-called black community, just like Mary J. or Rose Royce before her, it's going down. So I do think that people will actually love to buy into this and say, oh, Diddy was a victim, and there's going to be song after song, and people are going to martyr him and whatever. But just for me, I'm kind of tired of the circus that we've kind of been going through over the last, 10 years with this case, with Epstein, with hearing Jaguar talk about, oh, Diddy did this and oh, Jay-Z did this. I'm over it, I think. And I think this trial actually probably just put the nail in the coffin for me, because it just all seems like a joke. Yes, they're living immorally, but when it comes to legal things, it seems like they don't have anything.
Anton, there has been a whole industry created around gossiping about hip hop. She's Jaguar White, a bunch of people. I just got an email from the guy, Ronnie Bow, I think is his name, or someone that represents him. Hip hop stronger in the aftermath of Diddy, or unchanged, or how much influence over the culture? Will black people still define themselves by hip hop, and maybe even more so now that they can argue that Diddy's a martyr and or a victim?
Yeah, I think that nothing changes. The only thing that guys are going to do, because everything that we do culturally is influenced and is reflected by hip hop and rap music, right? It is either shown, or that is the thing that we mimic, and then it kind of trickles down into what we got going on. I think that guys are going to start tightening up, and the type of women that they deal with. I think that the things that they do and the paperwork that they have to give them in order to interact with them on a regular basis is going to change. I think that the fly-out culture, which was largely something that was highlighted and celebrated in hip-hop as far as flying women out, based off of the fact that it's easier to communicate with people on social media, I think that that might evolve a little bit, but nothing changes. I don't think that anything changes. As a matter of fact, Diddy wasn't really involved as much in hip-hop at the time of his arrest as before when he was at his height, So I think that what you're going to see is that people are going to start adjusting. Your cultural norms are going to be a little bit different. Maybe people are going to vet the type of women that they deal with on a regular basis, but I think that things go on as usual. Nothing changes. I think there are other people that's going to replace them, carry the torch, and you're going to see more liquor companies and more people promoting it, but more people continuing to party. I don't think anything changes whatsoever, except for people that tried to prosecute and get additional funding.
I want to follow up, Anton. You're younger than me, but you certainly were around when Magic Johnson announced he had HIV/AIDS. Mm-hmm. And there was this brief month, 2-month period where, oh man, I got to tighten up. I got, can't be doing that anymore. And that lasted about a month. And everybody went back to sleeping around and doing the same thing. And I'm not even sure if guys are going to tighten up. They're just going to try to stay out of harm's way and maybe handle their power that they feel that they have differently than Diddy.
Well, I mean, everything changes and everything evolves based off of the type of charges, not necessarily him going down, but what he went down for. So, for example, when I was growing up, they had this documentary called Pimps Up, right? I don't want to say the rest of it, but it was a pimping documentary.
Pimps Up, Hoes Down. It's a documentary,
okay.
Yeah.
All right, so you know what it is. But that documentary was celebrating the idea, which was also reflected in the music, whether you want to talk about the Too Shorts or even more recent, the Filthy Rich, the Oakland, Detroit, the Chicago connection, everybody getting together, even the music that was being played back then, whether you want to go to Snoop Dogg when he was saying bees ain't but hoes and tricks and all of that type of stuff. When you think about that, right? And then when they started to create charges to start to lock people up, people wanted to get out of the game because they were now giving them life. They were now throwing trafficking charges on these people instead of just arresting them and then being able to get out the next day, right? So when people are paying attention to the type of cases that's being levied against people, that is what shifts people's behavior because they don't want to get caught up in the same thing. When you seen people was selling drugs, and drug was a big deal. And then it transitioned over in the culture from celebrating the dealer to then being the user, right? And then you started seeing everybody rapping about fentanyl and Saturday lyrics and stuff. The things that happen on the street is often at times reflected in the lyrics. It's not the other way around. The people that are talking about it, right? When you seen BMF go down and all of that started to happen and everybody started having a fallout and all of the rappers that was associated with these people or within the culture of Atlanta and how they used to spend their money, that then changed the sentiment and the culture of how people moved and even what they rapped about because they were using people's lyrics in order to convict them. What I see happening is that the streets usually are the ones that dictate what happened in the culture. The rappers are usually the people that communicate what's happening in the streets. And the streets are often at times informed by what has happened as far as the type of people that are going down and the type of charges that's being levied. So if you see anything happen, it's going to happen on the streets first. It's not going to necessarily happen in the culture. The culture is usually the ones that capitalize off of it as far as the people talking about it on beat, but it don't necessarily happen at rap music at first. It always happens at the bottom and then it trickles up in hip hop. It's a difference. It's a whole nother type of wave.
I want to thank you all. Delano, I'm going to give you the final word, and then we're going to wrap this up. Delano, if you got some final thoughts, go ahead and fire off.
Yeah, I want to address the hip hop angle, Jason. And again, I'm completely moving the legal proceedings to the side, right? I think all of us are old enough to have been around early 90s when we started to see hip hop really sort of make its rise. And I'll say it this way: you can't sow degeneracy for 40 plus years and then think you're going to reap something other than that. So for me, what I see is that the type of behavior, I'm not talking about the charges, the type of behavior that we saw Diddy engaging in is completely consistent with the type of culture that hip hop was cultivating over the course of the 90s and 2000s. And for my personal projects, right, in terms of Jay-Z, we talk about the Black family marriage, creating a marriage culture within Black America, it's hard to do that when the most popular people in media consistently promote images either of violence between Black men, the disrespect and degradation of Black women, or a drug culture among Black youth. And one of the things, and I'll say this and I'll end here, one of the things that I don't think got nearly as much attention, particularly around the Cassie narrative, is not just, what she was doing with the freak offs and her behavior and threatening witnesses, allegations, threatening witnesses, all that. It's the notion like Cassie was with Diddy for a long time, wasted a good part of her 20s and probably some of her 30s with this person. And as a person who has 2 daughters, I'm thinking, I would love to see one of these think piece artists say, look, we need to teach our girls that they have more to offer the world than their looks. And we need to teach them that your soul is not worth the price of fame and all this other stuff. Because in the end, you're going to lose both of them, right? Cassie is not Beyonce. So Diddy didn't elevate her to that particular position. And now she has to go through the rest of her life knowing that she was basically used as, I don't know, I don't want to say it, but she was used as a
concubine.
Right, as a human receptacle, used and passed around by a man who quote unquote loved her, and that to me is a lesson that I think, particularly if you have daughters, be like, look, it's not worth it. Yeah, he might have a flashy car. Yeah, he might have a lot of money, but the things that you're going to have to pay in order to get that is not worth it. So the Bible says, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? And I think that verse has been applied to hip hop for a number of years. And at a certain point, as a community, we're gonna have to have a serious conversation about how to exercise this sellout spirit, the things we're willing to promote within the community, drug culture, gang culture, pimp culture within the community as normal, and then think that we're not gonna reap something from that. So again, I don't know where Diddy's gonna land. I don't know if he's gonna land on his feet. But this is something that has been coming. These chickens have been coming home to roost for quite some time.
This is crazy.
Thank you, guys. I gotta keep moving on. I gotta keep it moving. We got some sports topics to get to. Thank you all. Great job. Stick around. Steve Kim, Paul Shirley, and we'll talk a little bit about Lia Thomas and what UPenn did. Dame Lillard cut by the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll do that next.
Stand, fight, build. Stand, fight, build. You got it. Stand, fight, build. A man who won't stand for God will absolutely fall for anything. But a man who stands, he shifts generations. A man who won't fight will drown in his own lies. But a man who fights lays the foundation for revival to take place. And if there ever was a time in America where we need revival to take place, this is the time. But it's going to take some men who are not cowards and who are not running with a yellow streak down their back. It's going to take some men who will stand, and it's going to take some men who will fight. A man who won't build will leave dust. But a man who builds leaves monuments that hell cannot destroy. I don't know about anybody in here, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm trying to build something that hell cannot destroy. I'm trying to back hell up out of the south side of Chicago, and you don't have to look at me with that tone of voice. You ought to be trying to back hell up wherever you live. In your house, you ought to be building. On your block, you ought to be building. In your city, you ought to be building. This whole nation ought to be better, because what happens in this conference today, a group of men who have decided to stand, to fight, and to build. Stand as a fighter, fight like a builder, and build like a warrior. The hour is now.
Yeah, 모두 다 빨리 박수 쳐 기다리지 말고 서둘러 Reason that I'm back is to feed you raps but I see that you are 배불러 So fly
All right, welcome back. Paul Shirley in studio with me again. Steve Kim joining us from Los Angeles. The University of Pennsylvania apologized to Bill Lia Thomas. No, apologized for Bill Lia Thomas. There was a tweet that went out yesterday. UPenn has agreed to apologize for allowing male Bill Lia Thomas to compete on the women's swimming team. They will also vacate all of Bill's records and restore them to the women who rightfully earned them. Steve, I'll start with you. Is this too little too late?
Oh, it certainly is for those who had to compete against him. And I want to make the same analogy. I think in 2020 and 21, when we were talking about this, we were at a point in our country from a social and cultural standpoint, you had to give an endorsement of this or pretend that this was okay. Fast forward to 2025, I believe our society is at least in a place where we could be more honest in terms of these discussions regarding these subjects.
Paul, too little, too late?
It reminds me a lot of a retraction in a newspaper. You know the newspaper world, right?
Yeah.
Where
Correction,
you splash, you splash the headline, and then that's what people remember. And then later you can kind of take that away, which you can't blame the newspaper for doing that because that's how they sell papers. But it makes me think of that in terms of, will it really remind people of this or not? I don't know. I think Steve makes a good point regarding our own ability to notice things. Like, there's this idea that there's been a war on just paying attention and noticing the things that make sense to you. And if you see somebody who looks to be male swimming, your brain says that looks to be a male. And that's not necessarily a good judgment or a bad judgment, but the war has been on just your ability to notice that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's no question. And things that we're noticed, we're not supposed to notice. And if we do notice them, we're supposed to lie to ourselves about what we've noticed. I give them credit, though, because this is UPenn saying, hey, we were wrong, and they've put themselves in a position where, and we're not going to do this again. And, you know, that is repentance. I had a debate, discussion. Was it on the prayer group last night? I can't remember where, you know, we were talking about, is this repentance or is this an apology? I tend to lean towards it's an apology and repentance because they've locked themselves into a position that, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. And so when an Ivy League school sets this precedent, it's kind of a reflection of the culture overall that, okay, we're done playing this game. We tried it. It didn't work. I just don't see a reversal of course here as a possibility for any of these schools now. We've seen Trump come in with some executive orders that put pressure on people, and you know, he's gone to war with some of these Ivy League schools on a number of different issues. And this, to me, is a big win for sanity. And so I sincerely want to celebrate the University of Pennsylvania because I think it's hard for individuals or institutions to ever admit a mistake. I'm going too far celebrating them, Steve?
No, it's a survival technique, and you talked about it. If Donald Trump would not have won that election, but thankfully he did, and it was Kamala Harris in charge and the Democrats, there would be no apology. This is a reflexive motion to make sure that their funding does not get pulled. That is the reality to this situation. Again, culture and where it stands at a point in time will dictate what these people think. I think it was Thomas Sowell who said something to the effect, hell is paved with Harvard and Ivy League degrees. I think this is another case of it. But I will say this, though, guys. If there's ever an opportunity where we have to and actually want to watch a Sound Vibe, whatever that show is on ESPN+, a vibe check, this has to be the day, because some of those panelists, they were the biggest endorsers of this whole sham.
Let me ask you this, Steve, as a follow-up. So 2028, let's say Kamala Harris wins the presidency. You think UPenn reverses course?
Yes, I do. I think they're that gutless, that feckless, that dishonest. I really do. And what a nightmare scenario. What a nightmare. I mean, I'm actually afraid for us in California that there's talk of her running for governor because, hey, we can't possibly be worse than Gavin Newsom, right? Well, I look at Chicago. Chicago said, hey, we can't get worse than Lori Lightfoot. Want to bet? So, yeah, so that's a nightmare scenario. I hope you rescind that. I hope you retract that. I hope that never happens. But, yes, I do believe if something to that effect, which would be a doomsday scenario for us good Americans, I do believe all of this will be reversed.
That feckless?
I could imagine it going either way. I think the question I would reflect to you guys is this. Do you think anybody out in the world cares? And by that I mean, I mentioned yesterday that I spend some time driving through Iowa and Kansas, and I think a lot of people that are off the internet maybe don't even know that this story ever happened or don't really care. This is a question for both of you, how do you determine what matters to people in reality versus what just matters on?
Well, I determine it by, I have people very close to me, people that are like family to me, that this type of decision does affect them. They got young kids in school and they got transgender kids going to school with their kids, and they're trying to open up bathrooms. This has real impact. And so maybe they don't know Lia Thomas, but they know a bit of the story that like, hey, this is going on in sports, that you got boys winning girls state championships and sprint events all over the country. And so they may not know the details of this, but it's having a on the ground impact, this precedent. That's I think it's real to people, and I think it played a big role in why Donald Trump won the election, because most people just got common sense and it's like, this party is for this, and now my 8-year-old, 10-year-old little girl may have to share a bathroom with some 8 or 10-year or 12-year-old boy that wants to pretend he's a girl. I see this as a real issue. Steve?
Yeah, Paul, what I would call this is the seeping effect. It seeps in. I mean, you give them an inch, they'll take a whole football field. I'm a little older than you. I remember growing up, it was about gay rights. Don't bash them over the head with baseball bats, and everyone agreed. Then it became gay marriage. Yeah, you know what? They should go through the pain of marriage just like us straight people. I get it. Fast forward to 2020s, guess what? Teachers now want the right, and their unions, that if your child comes up to you, you don't have a say if they want to transition. They have effectively taken the way. Not only do you have to go to school with them, which is fine, but now these teachers seem to be indoctrinating, certain ones do, into a lifestyle. They put in the flag, they put in some messaging, and you as a parent all of a sudden are told you don't have a right to do any of this. So suddenly they came home with nail polish and they start cutting off their hair and other body parts. Guess what? We are now, as a society and a nation, well, hey, are you against them or what? That is what people are afraid of. So you could talk about, you're right, Paul. People in middle America may not care about a swim meet in an Ivy League. What they care about is the slow impact, the ripple effect that these things cause across the greater society.
Guys, I'm going to move on to a different topic. And Paul, I'll start with you here. You were a former professional athlete. Damien Lillard tore his Achilles this season for the Milwaukee Bucks. He was brought to the Bucks to help the Bucks win a championship with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Didn't work out. They didn't have a great season. He tears his Achilles. Damien Lillard, I believe, is 2 weeks away from turning 35 years old. And yesterday, the Milwaukee Bucks, I think with 2 years left on his contract, cut Damien Lillard. A lot of athletes, from Carmelo Anthony to a bunch of people, no loyalty in sports, business per usual. This is a cry of athletes. In the NBA, this guy's contract is guaranteed. He's going to get his money. He's, again, 2 weeks away from turning 35, Achilles tear. He's going to have to sit out pretty much all of next year. How good at 35 or 36, how good is he going to be? Is this a shining example of ownership malpractice or disloyalty. I don't see it that way, but the athletes certainly do.
In a way, it's the opposite of yesterday was also Bobby Bonilla Day. The day,
Yeah.
the day that he gets $1 million until 2035 or whatever,
Yeah.
which is in a way sort of the ultimate in loyalty, I suppose. I think it actually, not to overcomplicate things, but it kind of makes me think of the Lia Thomas and the Sean Combs situation, because in all of these cases, the person is the avatar for the issue. And in a lot of ways, they get used and then sort of tossed aside. So Damien Lillard is probably feeling a bit used, that he was built up. They probably sold him on the loyalty aspect. And you're right, he will get paid. But from an image or just emotional standpoint, it feels like being cast off. And I think that happens a lot when you become insulated from the actual world. You start to think, oh, these people do have my back. And then at some point that slides out from under you. And it is unsettling, even though there's money involved. So these people become avatars and start to think of themselves as maybe more important than they actually are in the fans' mind.
But it's the NBA, it's professional sports, it's transactional. Hey, we were paying you this money and we're gonna give you this money, but you've just torn your Achilles. You'll probably be 36 before you're healthy again. We got to do what's best for this fan base and team. We're giving you your money. We entered into a contract, and we're going to live up to that contract, but we got to move on and do what's best for the team. I don't see any disloyalty here. I just see business as usual.
Jason, I'm with you. If this was the NFL where a guy was in the second year of a 5-year deal and only part of that money, which it usually is guaranteed, and let's say $70 million is off the books now and he gets none of that, I'd feel like, man, that's cold-blooded. But the fact that his money is guaranteed, I think it's a win-win for everybody. And by the way, I know we're going to talk about this later, but Sophie Cunningham's probably thinking, wait a minute, he gets all his money, tens of millions, and he gets to leave Milwaukee? Win-win. No downside there as far as I'm concerned. But here's the issue, though. There is no loyalty in sports. Right. There's a saying in boxing, especially when a fighter leaves a trainer or a manager. All right. It's an old phrase that I learned years ago. Hey, you want loyalty? Buy a dog. And athletes, and no offense to Paul, try to have it their way all the time. They always want loyalty when it impacts them negatively. But when a player makes a decision to take either more money or go to a better winning situation, it's about, I got to do what's best for me. Well, I hate to tell you this, life in the big city, the organization gets to do what's best for them. And I'm going to relate this to myself. Halloween night, 1987. No, it's not Pearl Harbor, but for me, it's a day that'll live in infamy. I'm just a young man in Montebello High School who I idolized and worshipped one Eric Dickerson. Every year, a couple things happen. He'd get almost 1,500 to 2,000 yards, and he'd hold out. Eventually, he forced his way out, and he traded himself to Indianapolis for, guess what? More money. You know why? Because he felt he had to do that for himself. Never thought of the old Kimster who had a poster on his room. Okay? Never thought of me, right? So, again, there is no loyalty in sports.
Sure. But having gone through this myself, one of the things that we trade on in watching sports is the passion that the athlete feels, right? They care about
the passion that the fan feels, but go ahead.
Well, as a fan, we want the athletes to care about the game. And the best way to evoke that is to get the players to care about and to tie their identity to how they play on the court or on the field. I went through this myself. I'm sure that you went through it leaving maybe the newspapers, right? That you devoted your heart and soul to this job. It became a part of who you are. And so whether it makes sense logically or not is hard to debate, because emotionally it's about, I feel now betrayed, whether there's money involved or not, because that's what I was sold all along, was you have to commit to this with your whole heart, your whole soul. So I think what we see is this disconnect, because yes, the athlete should be able to think about this logically, but they can't because they never have. To get good, you had to commit so fully that it's impossible to detach yourself and look at it like a fan. Because I see it both ways, right? I'm now out of sports, and so there's a part of me that says, well, he should understand that there's logic, there's dollars, there's contracts at play, but I also remember what it was like to be on the inside. and that it took 2 years of therapy and a therapist saying, you know what, you're exactly like a 70-year-old guy who just got handed his watch at State Farm. Your whole identity was tied to this, and now we have to undo that. Now, again, whether that's good or bad, I don't know, but that's what we're trading on when we get athletes to care as much as they do.
Steve, it sounds like you want to jump in.
Well, it reminds me of that classic line from that great movie, North Dallas 40, based on the book by Peter Gent. I actually happened to read it about a month ago. And the character of O.W. Meadows, played by former Oakland Raider John Matuzak, who did a brilliant job in his role as a football player. But he delivered one of the greatest lines I've ever heard in any movie. They lose the big game, coach is on him, and he got really angry. And he said, every time I call it a game, you say it's a business. Every time I say it's a business, you say it's just a game. I need feeling, man. And he was about to beat him up. I think that really encapsulates the player, owner, and fan relationship in sports. And the way we feel about it, the emotion of loyalty to the pull of the actual business, it'll change based on the circumstances. I will say this about Dame Lillard. If he really had his heart set on ending his career with the Milwaukee Bucks, I do feel for him, okay? But the reality is he began his career, and I think most people still know him as a Portland Trailblazers. And I go back to this. He's still getting his money. Still getting his money.
I'm going to tie Sophie Cunningham into this discussion. She was at the WNBA is expanding to Detroit and to Cleveland in the subsequent years, and there's a third city that I can't think of, but she took a shot at Detroit and Cleveland, and actually called Cleveland Cincinnati, but she meant Cleveland. And she's once again, to me, making it all about the players. But she got asked, and she doesn't like where the WNBA is expanding. Let's play the clip.
NBA side, because it is helpful. It's way more helpful. You just get more perks, more opportunities, and so I get that aspect. But I also think that you want to listen to your players too. Like, where do they want to play? Where are they going to get excited to play and draw fans? And I do think that Miami would have been a great one. Like, everyone loves Florida. Nashville is an amazing city. Kansas City, amazing opportunity. There's a huge arena downtown that no one's using, and I think that the Women's Soccer League is showing that, like, people draw, you know, and so I'm not so sure what the thought process is there. But at the end of the day, you also want to make sure that you're not expanding our league too fast. I think that's also another thing, that you don't want teams to totally dominate and then have teams that aren't. And so I just think that it's kind of a hard decision-making situation. But man, I don't know how excited people are to be going to Detroit or Cincinnati.
So she says Cincinnati, she means Cleveland. This is my problem with athletes. I'm just telling you, everything is about them. And this is my problem, I think, with just modern American culture. Everything's about them. But when it comes to sports, I'm just telling you, the fan is the last person any of these people think about. And don't you understand? We'd love to go play in Miami. All the players love Miami. And we'd love to be in Nashville and on Broadway and, listen to the country music. And maybe we'd run into Morgan Wallen. But, Cleveland and Detroit, there's no depth. And I know she's just 27, 28. She's a smoke show. Men are never honest with her. I know I wouldn't be honest with her. And I'm only taking this risk right now being honest with her because I'm hoping she doesn't see this. But that's what happens. Beautiful women and athletic people never get told no, and it distorts reality for them, and it causes arrested development.
So one of the things we have committed to is that each player is now their own little brand. When I played professional basketball, I would tell people often that the NBA was a lot more sterile than I realized because the guys didn't hang out. Like, I read these biographies of baseball players growing up from the 1920s and 30s and love that idea of you're on the train, you're having dinner in Cleveland together, and afterwards you're going out and chasing the smoke shows who are 27 or 28. When I got to the NBA, I realized it was much more antiseptic because each player was starting to understand that they were a brand. They were their own thing. And I think we have to, as fans or denizens of the internet take some responsibility where we want so much access to them. We want them to have Instagram pages, but if we
I don't,
do that,
but anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, maybe you and I don't, but there is this push-pull where does that basketball player really need to be asked that question? But we are, in a way, culturally asking her to create so much content all the time that she has to say something. Now, again, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but we also have to reckon with it's just different than it was in 1992 when there were only a few networks talking about sports. We expect everybody to have their own little brand and their own little take on every single thing. So then they're probably going to say some stuff that we don't particularly appreciate.
I think you raise a legitimate point, but she has the opportunity to say, you know, that's above my pay grade. You know, there's a bunch of decisions and factors when you do expansion to any league. What ownership group is most passionate? Where's your best chance of selling tickets? What city, you know, is going to embrace this? And it just doesn't come. Well, we should have asked the players where they want to live because, man, they would really love to be on South Beach in a bikini with their rear end out. I know that's what I would love to do. This is what Sophie Cunningham is thinking. But
I would love for your bottom to be out in Miami also, Jason. That sounds delightful.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And anyway, Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, just a couple things here. I think the people of Cincinnati are very relieved she misspoke. Second of all, I'm going to say this again. The whole culture and the ecosystem of the WNBA is the most unlikable of any sport I've seen in America. This is another example why. First of all, Miss Cunningham, the reality is this. No one is forcing you to play there. You're going on a road trip. These are business trips is what they are. No one's forcing you to play in that city and be there for 5-6 months. We all go through work assignments and we have to go to places we don't like, and you're in and you're out and you're a professional. These women talk about the growth of the game, expanding the game, and having a bigger reach with our league, and this is how they react. And by the way, I want to say something about the South Florida sports culture, being a diehard Miami Hurricane fan. If Miami's not playing for a national championship or a big game, which has been the case for about 20 years, unless they're playing Florida State or one of the other signature schools, nobody really goes. It's a punchline in college football that we accept because, quite frankly, it's true. And Ms. Cunningham, with all due respect, unless you're playing at Caitlin Clark, your games will be even less attended than Miami's games against Wake Forest that begin at noon. They don't want you. You may think it's great for you to be in South Beach and have your fun. The problem is you'd have 15 people there. That is the reality. Again, most athletes, and especially these ladies who have been subsidized for about, 30 years, they have an incredible sense of entitlement with not an ounce of obligation. It's sad and it is disgusting to watch.
Steve, you make an excellent point. And I hope I'm just not repeating what you said, but go to Detroit. It's cold during the winter, and I gotta know they play in May, but there's a lot less entertainment competition in Detroit. In South Florida, where she'd love to be and post it up and play for that Miami team, you can go out every day just to the beach and sunshine. You got nightclubs everywhere. There's a lot of entertainment options, and people would be less likely, I need to go watch this WNBA game and watch them miss a bunch of layups in Miami, whereas in Detroit, where there's less to do, they're more, anyway, there's just a lot of issues
Jason,
and thoughts that she hasn't thought about. Yep.
During the Heatles, which was the Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, and Chris Bosh era, it was kind of like this thing where nobody would show up on time. And I think there's traffic just like there is in LA. But if you watch, even during the heyday of that run, which was 4 years, that if you watch the first quarter of those games in Miami, there were a lot of empty seats. People have a very casual attitude towards sports. It's a big event city. It's a lot like LA. Look at the baseball team, the Marlins. They literally have hundreds of people going. This is Major League Baseball. And if you watch, and I have an old line, that place is so empty, you could throw hand grenades into the stands. Nobody would get hurt. So her thing is, oh, well, we'd love to be in Miami. Right. They don't want you. That is the reality. And Paul, I know you must have gone through this as an athlete. When you look at your schedule, there must have been cities, all of your guys like, oh, we're coming to Atlanta, we're coming to LA, New York. But there are other cities you're like, oh, Indiana, Milwaukee. Guess what, though? That's part of the deal of a league. That is what you signed up for.
Got to end this on that note. Don't want your response, Paul, because I got to squeeze in as the WNBA turns. Let's get to that.
As the WNBA turns, starring Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Asia Wilson, and other angry feminists. Brought to you by George Soros, Adam Silver, Kathy Engelbert, and the Global Elite.
It's my favorite time of the show where I get to focus in on Caitlin Clark and the WNBA. Easy topic here, and Paul, I'll get you to fire first here. The WNBA had their Commissioner's Cup championship yesterday, and the Indiana Fever beat the best team in the league, the Minnesota Lynx. Beat them pretty handily, I believe 74-59. They win this Governor's Cup championship. Here's what's interesting, though. Caitlin Clark did not play. The Indiana Fever, she's been out, this is her third or fourth straight game. She's been out with this groin injury. They beat the best team in the WNBA kind of handily. They did it with a tremendous defensive performance, holding the Minnesota Lynx to 59 points. Caitlin Clark is a liability on defense, and Indiana just had one of their best defensive performances. Do we think winning this game, and I think they won their last two games without Caitlin Clark, is this a good thing or bad thing for the Indiana Fever to be beating the best team in the league without their best player and, kind of the center of their universe?
It seems like it's mostly a bad thing for you, your love of Caitlin Clark. How does it make you feel?
It concerns me, and because I reached some uncomfortable conclusions like, hey, they play better defense, a lot better, and I've seen Caitlin Clark's bad defensively. They play a lot better defensively without Caitlin Clark, and Caitlin Clark's turnovers are a problem, and so. But let's evaluate Caitlin Clark. No one cares what I think.
We do. That's why we're here.
Yeah. How does Caitlin Clark feel?
Oh, she probably doesn't feel great, especially after the launch of the shoe, right? Because this was all the same week, was it?
Yeah.
The Kobe Bryant shoe that we talked about this week. Which, by the way, I have to mention today's my last day here, at least for a while. And yesterday I pulled off the triumvirate where I got called the C word, the F word, and the R word all on Twitter, thanks to the last couple of days here.
Oh, wow.
Which is pretty, that's
We're
a
upset
pretty
with you.
triple crown of insult.
What's the C word?
Rhymes with runt.
Oh, wow.
And
It
bunch.
went hardcore.
And
I thought it was maybe coon. They called it, but that was
no,
probably
wrong
me.
They
color.
were not
Wrong
British.
color for
They
that.
weren't saying it in a friendly way. Yeah. I would imagine, yes, Caitlin Clark, probably a bit of a whirlwind week. Wasn't there something also about the amount of money that they won because of?
Yeah, they won a big pot of money. I think $500,000. That's like $50,000 a player. It was a big payday for them in winning that. And I think they get more money for winning that than winning the WNBA championship.
I think that's what she said. And I wonder, and I'm not being snide, does the WNBA turn a profit yet?
No.
So shouldn't
Hell
it be
no.
thrilled? Like, I've run businesses that do not turn a profit, and when you finally do, you're like, oh wow, now people can get paid. It seems interesting that they're complaining about the amount of money for one championship not being enough when the whole thing doesn't make money. Doesn't that, it's kind of like this war on noticing.
They're entitled. Trust, they're women, they're entitled. And I say that with a little bit of love and affection, but it's also just reality. And so you don't think Caitlin Clark feels good. Steve, do you think Caitlin Clark feels good about them beating the Minnesota Lynx?
Well, first of all, before I answer that, I want to apologize to Paul for having drug you into this segment, not my call. But anyway, yeah, look, if you're Caitlin Clark, there has to be some self-reflection. And I think there has to be some evolving in her game. Like, do I have to do less offensively and more defensively? and just go with the flow of the game. And when my long distance shot is not falling, adjust my game. But guys, you know, before you gave me that bit of information, I was about to ask or say, the only thing more worthless and less important than a in-season NBA tournament is a WNBA in-season tournament. But obviously that's not true. You set me straight on that. I don't get these in-season tournaments. Are the regular seasons that unimportant that you have to do this? I said this.
It's global outreach.
Local outreach.
It's global outreach. This is what's commonplace in Europe and some of these other countries, these in-season tournaments. And so they're Europeanizing our basketball.
Great. Another reason they hate globalization.
Having played in Europe, I will say that some of those mid-season tournaments take teams from different tiers and pit them against each other. So it could be interesting if someday the NBA got creative. They took maybe the returning champion from the year before in the NBA versus the college champion versus a Division II champion versus a European champion. That probably would be kind of interesting because it is true that there are mid-season tournaments in Europe, but a lot of them are mixing things up so that the Hoosier story can be played out in real time because a team from a second or third division could jump up.
Are you talking about the WNBA mix? Because NBA versus a college team, that would be a total mismatch.
Well, but it would be interesting for fans, would it not? To see what that looks like.
See someone get blown out by 70 points?
And that's what they think will always happen in Europe. But first tier to second tier in Europe is a big jump. But sometimes that second tier team may have some magic. I would just say that, yes, you're right that it is very Europeanized, but there's a bit of a detail there where you're talking about some mixture of tiers.
You like this idea, Steve?
I love this idea. I like it more than the in-season tournament. If it was one or the other, I would take Paul's recommendation because if you look at Major League Baseball, I was actually a very big baseball fan. That's what I played growing up. There was a magic to the World Series and the All-Star game because there was no interleague play to the late 90s. So there were certain matchups where you'd say, wow, we don't get to see this unless it's spring training, which doesn't count. And it was so rare to see the Dodgers and Yankees on the same field. I'm not saying it hasn't been great for Major League Baseball, but it has watered down the impact. Now, to Paul's idea, if you see an intermingling of teams that otherwise would never be on the same court at the same time, that is a novelty that I could kind of accept and maybe enjoy. The problem with the in-season tournament, it just feels like a regular season game on a funny-looking court where you get a trophy at the end. There's nothing unique about two teams that'll always play each other playing again in the middle of the season.
What about this? And I don't know if they would ever do it because it would be too high risk. But you could move every year. You could move it from WNBA city to WNBA city. And so let's say this year was held in Indiana. And you'd have the Commissioner's Cup game, and it's the WNBA champion versus the high school state champion, male high school state champion in Indiana.
Yes.
Men's high school. And then, you know, if it's in Detroit, you play the Michigan high school state champion.
It sounds like the gauntlet has been thrown down. This is Bobby Riggs, right? Like, I think you're throwing that out there. Are they up for it?
I don't know. It would be high risk because if they got embarrassed, if they got blown out, would that be bad for the league, or would the ratings be so phenomenal that even if they got blown out, it would be interesting?
Well, the ratings would be great for the first half. I mean, until the game's about a 40-point blowout. And Jason, I like what you're thinking. Have that first one in Detroit. Oh, Sophie Cunningham's going to love that. She loves that idea. In Detroit.
How do we get relegation to America? Because relegation in Europe is fascinating.
It would help the NBA.
People. It would help every major sport, I think, to have
certainly the NBA.
Certainly the NBA, but I also think Major League Baseball would do well with something like that because the season gets so long and there's just no reason to keep playing if you're the Colorado Rockies. If you were threatened with, we're going to be sent down, I think there would be some interest there.
That would be awesome. Paul, you got a flight to catch. And I got some more work to do. Steve's got to move on with life in LA, where I'm sure it's sunny and 80 degrees. It's raining here, or it seems like it rains every day. Steve, thank you so much. Great job. Paul, I'm going to let you get in your Uber and get out of here. I want you guys in 10 minutes to join me on the Harmony channel, where I'll be talking with Ali Anisfeld. He runs something called Jewish TV or JTV. He had some criticism of me. I'm going to give you a taste of what he had to say about my discussion around Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson and the whole debate over Israel. I'm going to play, he argues here in this shot that I'll play, and I'll play some others on the Harmony channel in 10 minutes, but he argues here, we're going to play shot number 4, that I'm worshiping equality and that I'm an egalitarian. Anyway, let's play this clip, and then I'll see you. Well, after this clip plays, we'll play tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow on this channel. But let's play this clip, and then I'll see you on the Harmony channel in about 10 minutes.
The last thing I would say on this, and I think this is really important, is he talks about worshipping idols. And he says, you know, this is just my gut sense. Maybe scripture can prove me wrong. I would politely suggest that one thing that we can sometimes do is we can have our own concepts of what God should say or what God would want. For example, he in some ways thinks that equality across the board, everything being, you know, there being no differences in roles for people or land, and that's what he's saying must be the case. I would say that he's made a form of equality or egalitarianism his idol. I would say you're making that your God in a way. That's what you're worshipping. Sort of saying, I don't know if scripture can prove me wrong. Well, read the scriptures, read what God says. That is worshipping God. If you're worshipping just what you think is the case, you're worshipping idols. You're worshipping, in this case, egalitarianism, which is not what God says. God has unique roles for all of us. Not just the Jewish people, by the way.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came in like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all this moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on a corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, all deceiving. We all wanna be free.